set to take a bold step towards local economic recovery with plans to establish 1,000 active businesses in every ward across the country. This initiative aims to stimulate local economies, create jobs, and empower communities at the grassroots level. Hello and welcome to MarketSquare, your go-to show for deeper insights into business and economic trends. I'm Olaitan Adebayo, and today we'll unpack how this ambitious strategy could reshape Nigeria's economic landscape and what it means for communities nationwide. Stay tuned. Welcome back to MarketSquare. If there is one thing this administration keeps returning to, it's the idea that Nigeria's economic revival has started from the ground up, and that message got a much louder megaphone on the global stage. At the G20 summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, President Tinubu, represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima, laid out a bold claim: Nigerian plans to build 1,000 active businesses in every ward across the country. Now, when you break that down, we're talking about 8,809 wards, meaning that government is essentially proposing creating over 8 million functioning enterprises at the grassroots level. It's a kind of promise that instantly raises eyebrow, not because the idea is out of place, but because the full extent of the project. On paper, it sounds like a massive push to rebuild the economy from the bottom up. The idea is straightforward: empower communities directly, support small entrepreneurs, create jobs where people actually live, and reduce Nigerians' overdependence on federal or state-led programs. In a country where unemployment is high and many young people rely on informal hustle, a grassroots-driven model could change how economic participation works. But beyond the headline figure, the president's message had a deeper undertone. It wasn't just talking to Nigerians. It was speaking directly to the world's biggest economies, the same countries controlling the global financial rules that African nations constantly have to adjust to. Tinubu pushed the argument that the current global financial system no longer reflects today's realities, and that without major reform, developing countries will keep running in circles, rising debt, limited investment flows, and patchy economic progress. But the big question is feasibility. Starting a business is more than an announcement. It requires funding, infrastructure, management, and a clear sense of who runs what. Without clarity on how the government intends to create finance and sustain this enterprise, the plan risks being another ambitious headline that does not translate into measurable impact. Nigeria has launched similar empowerment programs in the past, but they struggled because the structure was weak and the follow-up through wasn't there. His message to the G20 was essentially a push for deeper reforms, reform how global financial flows are managed, improve debt restructuring frameworks, and allow countries in the global south more equitable access to capital. Nigeria is pushing itself as ready for foreign investment, pointing to fiscal reforms meant to make it easier to do business. Investors, however, will look for consistency, stable policies, a predictable FX market, and credible institutions before making long-term commitments. The president also highlighted trade and export expansion, especially for women-led businesses using digital platforms. Nigeria has been trying to diversify away from crude oil, and any support that helps small businesses enter global market is a step in the right direction. But for export-led growth to be meaningful, the domestic economy needs strong power supply, efficient logistics, and reduced multiple taxations, issues that remain unsolved. The appeal for sustainable financing is another important point. Nigerians' rising debt burden is already squeezing the budget, and there is little room for social and capital spending. Tinubu's warning that local challenges are becoming global risks resonates, especially in a period where global shocks spread quickly across economies. But again, calls for reform abroad must be matched with credible policy discipline at home. The promise to create 1,000 businesses per ward signals a focus on grassroots empowerment, but Nigerians will be watching to see if this becomes a structured program with clear budgeting, transparent implementation, and measurable outcomes. The country needs real investment at the community level, but it also needs systems that ensure such investments do not disappear into paperwork. In the end, the president's message at the G20 blends ambition with advocacy. Ambition in what he promises to do locally, and advocacy in what he wants the global system to change. The challenge, as always, is turning speeches into results that ordinary Nigerians can feel. Expert note signs that the economy is regaining balance, inflation is easing, the naira is stabilizing, and investor confidence is slowly returning. But the stress, the growth must be inclusive for everyday Nigerians to feel the benefits. If you follow Nigeria's economy closely, you will notice that the conversation is beginning to shift. For a long time, the story was the same: prices rising too fast, the naira unstable, and businesses unsure of their next move. But the latest inflation numbers are hinting a different direction. The pressure hasn't disappeared, but is easing slowly. Inflation for October came in at 16.05%, down from 18.02% in September. It is still high, nobody is pretending otherwise, but the pace of increase is no longer as aggressive. A lot of this is tied to the central bank's recent reforms. FX conditions are calmer, liquidity is improving, and the country's external reserves have climbed back to about $46 billion, which is something we haven't seen in a while. This is also shaping expectations ahead of the next MPC meeting. After the surprise rate cut in September, the sense now is that the CBN may continue easing, just not recklessly. And that earlier cut clearly helped in slowing inflation. But even with all this progress on paper, the truth is that many Nigerians are not feeling any major relief yet. Chief Executive Officer of Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf, have made that point repeatedly. Lower inflation doesn't automatically mean cheaper food or reduced transport costs. It simply means prices are not rising as fast as before, but they are still rising. The CBN, however, believes the reforms are gaining ground. A more stable naira, improved coordination with fiscal authorities, and a calmer financial market are some of the signals they highlight. The NBC numbers back that up. When you compare today's 16.05% to the 33.88% recorded in October last year, the difference is clear. The momentum has shifted. This wide stability is also affecting how global bodies see Nigerian. The IMS 2025 outlook puts growth at 3.9%, largely because FX pressures are easing and investor confidence is quietly returning. Now let's talk about the naira for a moment. Over the last 10 months, it has appreciated by 3.5% from around 1,555 naira per dollar earlier in the year to roughly 1,450 naira per dollar now in the parallel market. Even the official market saw some improvement in October. CBN Governor Yemi Cardozo said the naira is basically turning the corner, and some of that is thanks to stronger reserves and a better trade position. You can also see how businesses are adjusting. Some manufacturers that previously depended on imports are shifting to more local production, even exporting small volumes. Moves like this reduce FX demand and help ease the pressure on the currency. On the export side, they noted that yes, the numbers are improving. Yes, policy reforms are working, but growth has to translate to better jobs, higher incomes, and improved living standards. Otherwise, the recovery won't mean much for ordinary Nigerians. The point aligns with the broader economic environment. Nigeria is still dealing with slow global growth, rising geopolitical tensions, and structural issues at home, but the economy has managed to stay on its feet. Reforms in oil, agriculture, and services are helping. The recent GDP rebasing is also highlighting growth pockets in sectors like tech, modular refinery, and the creative space. The inflation trend supports that narrative from 20.12% in August to 18.02% in September and now 16.05%. The direction is clearly downward. Better food supply, the harvest season, and adjustments in energy pricing have played their part. At the same time, the CBN is widening the channels for the FX inflows. Diaspora remittances about $23 billion annually remain a strong support, and with more money transfer operators licensed, the expectation is that inflows will strengthen. Combined with other reforms, this explains why the country's external reserves have gone up and why the naira is holding better. What the numbers show is that the economy is slowly regaining balance, inflation isn't raising her head like before, the naira is finding stability, and investor confidence is rising again. The next phase is ensuring that these improvements translate into real relief for households and businesses, because that is ultimately what will define whether this recovery is sustainable. Trade is playing a major role in the recovery, contributing 40 trillion naira to GDP in the first half of 2025. Nigeria's trade sector is showing remarkable strength in the first half of 2025, contributing 40.71 trillion naira to the country's gross domestic product. At first glance, these numbers suggest an economy that is thriving, boosted by expanding knowledge exports, rising gas sales, and increased refinery activity. But as we dig deeper, the story becomes a bit more detailed. According to National Bureau of Statistics, the first quarter brought about 14.59 trillion naira, and the second quarter jumped sharply to 26.12 trillion naira. That's nearly a 79% increase in just 3 months. And then compared to the same period in 2024, trade's contribution grew by over 29%. Export reached 43.35 trillion naira. Imports were 30.71 trillion naira, giving Nigeria a trade surplus of 12.64 trillion naira. A big part of this growth comes from non-oil exports, which climbed from 1.43 trillion naira in 2020 to 6.21 trillion naira in just the first half of 2025. On top of that, natural gas production sales are on the rise, boosting trade volumes further. Refineries are producing more, and the energy goods like LNG, CNG, and LPG are increasingly supporting both domestic demand and trade. But here's the key point. While trade is growing fast, manufacturing hasn't kept pace. Local factories are struggling with high energy costs, unsold inventories, and weak purchasing power. Experts warn that if manufacturing doesn't expand, the economy is relying too heavily on imports. Essentially, we are trading more, but not necessarily producing more at home, which can limit job creation and long-term industrial growth. Another interesting point is that trade real growth, which slowed slightly from 1.78% in the first quarter to 1.29% in the second. This isn't alarming. Seasonal changes and structural performance in other sectors explain the relative slowdown. Still, it raises a flag about which parts of trade are really driving growth. If imports dominate, risks exporting jobs while importing goods, which doesn't strengthen domestic industries. For Nigerians to benefit fully, trade growth must be balanced with a strong manufacturing base. Right now, the numbers are showing the economy is active, exports are rising, and energy and gas production are helping. But the real wins comes when manufacturing and small business and local industries scale alongside trade. Trade is the engine reviving right now, but manufacturing is the wheel that will actually move the country forward. Policymakers and stakeholders are calling for stronger industrial policies, support for light manufacturing, and sustained production of export-oriented production to ensure that this growth is not just numbers on a page, but translates into jobs, income, and long-term economic stability. So what we're seeing is a dual reality. Nigerian trade sector is thriving and pulling in record contributions to GDP, but without a corresponding manufacturing boost, the economy risks depending too much on imports. The challenge going forward is clear: turn this trade momentum into sustainable industrial growth, and that is when the benefit will truly reach everyday Nigerians. While Nigeria's trade sector is expanding impressively, the growth must be balanced with real sector development, particularly manufacturing. Experts are calling for stronger industrial policy, more support for light manufacturing, and sustained promotion of export-oriented production. Only then will rising trade numbers translate into broader sustainable economic gains, creating jobs, boosting domestic industry, and ensuring that growth benefits the wider economy rather than just reflecting short-term trade surpluses. It's not just the traditional sector seeing progress. The EU has launched a €30 million initiative to empower Nigeria's creative sector. It's not every day that Nigerian creative sector gets a boost that goes beyond just funding. This time, it's about connecting artists directly to global networks, skills, and long-term cultural influence. The European Union has launched the Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture Nigerian Cluster, a €30 million program designed to pull Nigerian artists and cultural organizations into deeper collaboration with partners across Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa. And make no mistake, this move is bigger than it sounds on paper. The EU approach is different. They are not just hosting exhibitions, panels, or conferences. They are investing directly in the people who create culture, the artists, the filmmakers, curators, writers, and creative professionals shaping the industry every day. At the launch in Lagos, the message was clear. This is not charity, and this is not a casual cultural exchange. It's a deliberate effort to bridge that connects ideas, stories, and industries. Nigeria, with its wealth of talent, is at the heart of this initiative. Yet the challenge has always been access to funding, to feasibility, to global networks, and to structure that can sustain long-term growth. What the project does is widen the door. It allows Nigerian creatives to collaborate, produce, and showcase their work on platforms that were previously harder to reach. The focus on amplifying African voices is not just a tagline. It ties into broader EU programs already underway, including museum partnerships across Africa and Europe worth millions, as well as upcoming projects supporting audiovisual industries. All of these are part of the EU's global go-to strategy, which aims to expand people-to-people links, not just infrastructure. Through this initiative, Nigerian creatives can now access training, support, and networking opportunities that will transform their careers. The project is designed to create real pipelines for collaboration, funding, and long-term professional growth. In a region where many creatives still work without sustainable structures, this represents more than opportunity. It represents exposure, income potential, and a chance to operate on a global stage. The significance of this launch is profound. It changes the conversation about Nigeria's creative economy from potential to scaled participation. The EU is betting that African creativity is not just culturally valuable, but also economically and diplomatically significant. For illustrators, filmmakers, musicians, and curators, this opens doors that could reshape how Nigerian talent is trained, funded, and recognized worldwide. Beyond individual careers, this initiative strengthens the framework around talent. It gives creators ways to showcase their work, find collaborators, and expand their reach far beyond Nigeria. With proper implementation, it can professionalize the industry and boost cultural exports. In a sector that already shows Nigerians' global influence, this program creates a real chance to scale up. The country has always had the talent, but what has been missing is steady support, visibility, and well-connected network. This project has the potential to close those gaps. The EU's goal is simple and powerful: create spaces where creative voices can be heard, where talents can grow without limits, and where stories that often remain unseen can finally find their place on global stage. For many Nigerian creators, this could be the pathway they've been waiting for, a step towards not just recognition, but real impact globally and not at home. That wraps up today's episode from Nigerians' plan to establish 1,000 businesses in every ward to expert calls for inclusive growth, the 40 trillion naira GDP boost driven by trade, and the EU's 30 million euros initiative to empower artists in the creative sector. I'm Olaitan Adebayo, and this is Market Square. Thank you for watching and see you on the next one.